The Idries Shah Foundation presents Seeker After Truth by Idries Shah, from Tales, Discussions and Teachings, Letters and Lectures. First published 1978, published in this edition 2018. This audiobook is narrated by David Ault. Part 1. Tales of the Classical Masters. Praying for Rain. It is recounted among the wise that there was once a great drought at Qasr al-Arifin, and the people went to the master Bahauddin Naqshband, asking him to pray, to ask God for rain. He led them through the streets until he came to a place where a woman sat, nursing a small baby in her arms. "I beg of you to feed that infant," said the master. "I know when to feed the child," said the woman, "as I am his mother. Why do you concern yourself with things which are disposed of in a manner whereof you know nothing?" Bahauddin had the woman's words written down and read out to the crowd. The one without the other. It is recorded that a man went to Ahmad Yasavi, the Sufi master of Turkestan, and said, "Teach me without books, and let me learn to understand without the intervention of a master between me and truth, for humans are frail, and reading books does not enlighten me." Yasavi said, "Do you seek to eat without a mouth, or to digest without a stomach? Perhaps you would like to walk without feet and buy without paying. I could do as you ask only if you could first dispense with physical organs, as you wish to avoid those things which have been devised for the spiritual organs. Just think for a moment whether you could use food without an apparatus, approach the Sufis without having heard of them in the words you so dislike, desire wisdom without a source appropriate to your state. It may be an amusing pastime to think of learning without books as a basis, and experiencing without a teacher. So is it an amusing pastime to think of magic and miracles? Aside from the amusement, what of the permanent yield of the activity? The disobedience of Moses. According to Abu Talib Maki, Moses related tales of how he learnt to widen his understanding from narrow assumptions to correct perspective. Moses was ill, and he was offered various remedies to treat the sickness. But he refused, saying that God would help him instead. But God, it is related, commanded Moses to use medicines, saying, "By refusing to accept the mission of the medicine, you have called into question the wisdom of him who endowed the remedies with their virtue." It is for this reason that there is a saying, "Trust in God and tie your camel." If you are expected to do nothing, why is there such a thing as a camel hobble? Hadrat Bahauddin Naqshband of Bukhara has said in this connection, "If a withering leaf says by its appearance that it needs water, and because you have the power to provide it, you also have the duty to do so, these words of the leaf are the manifestation of the command of the creator of the leaf, and are addressed to you. If you insist upon a personal command from the originator, ask why the means of communication has been placed before you. Is it there for you to neglect?" Sting into remedy. There were once two grandees in the city of Bistam who disliked one another because of some ancient rivalry. Both of them, as it happened, also wanted to study the secrets of man's origins and destiny under the renowned man of wisdom, Ali Beg, whose home was in a distant part of Persia. But Ali, before seeing them, wrote to another sage, Ibn Hamza, who lived near Bistam, and asked him to speak to them on his behalf. but each refused to see Ibn Hamza. The first grandee said, "I want the root, not the branch." The second said, "Ibn Hamza is a nobody." Now Ibn Hamza began to spread scurrilous rumours about the two would-be illuminates. After some months, hearing venomous tales about themselves from all sides, and having traced them to Ibn Hamza, the two aristocrats felt mutually assailed, became reconciled to one another, united in their anger against Ibn Hamza, and went to see him full of fury. They stormed and raged at Ibn Hamza, completely forgetting every single counsel of wisdom which they had heard throughout their lives up to that time. "Do you know why we have come to see you, despicable wretch?" they screamed, as soon as they entered Ibn Hamza's presence. "Yes, indeed I do," answered Ibn Hamza. "You have come, firstly, because Ali Beg wanted to demonstrate how fundamentally shallow your deep feelings of mutual enmity are. Secondly, because you are required to show that your superficial feelings could easily be manipulated to make you come here, even though you had individually made up your minds at first not to do so. Thirdly, because although disobedient to Ali Beg's orders, you could be shown that certain desires must be carried out. Fourthly, you are here so that the other people present at this moment can learn, and you can be their unwitting teacher in this transaction. Fifthly, because both Ali Beg and I had need of showing the poisonous local populace, riddled with suspicion and delighted at spreading rumours such as the ones which I initiated about you too, that we men of the heart are not their inevitable victims, but that we may also know how to employ their harmful actions against their harmfulness itself. Sixthly, you are here because, as a consequence of the foregoing events, facts and explanations, there is a prospect of transforming a sting into a remedy and a weapon into an instrument of value. Weapons. Hakim AlMansouri was a great sage of Balkh in Central Asia. He had thousands of disciples, and his mere presence at the courts of kings was regarded as conferring legitimacy upon their rule. But he very seldom spoke. When he did, it was about matters which did not seem to be connected with spiritual concerns. And yet many great masters of the Sufi way attribute their attainments to having sat at his table, or from being in his guest house, or even from associating with the other disciples, or working in his house. One day, the Hakim was challenged by a famous preacher to dispute with him on matters of philosophy. The preacher claimed that AlMansouri knew nothing about wisdom and spoke very little on weighty matters because he was ignorant of them. AlMansouri set out for Herat, where the challenger, Qari Mukhtar, taught at a famous college. Each of the disputants was attended by hundreds of students who had assembled, together with a multitude of townsfolk, to witness the duel of these giants. The Qari, as the challenger, began his tirade with a carefully thought-out sentence, obviously preparing to launch a full-scale attack. Then suddenly, after less than a minute, the Hakim stood up and pointed his finger at the Qari, who stood like stone, abruptly ceasing to speak. Then he fled from the hall. On the way home, one of the disciples said to his master, who had been cheered to the echo by the delighted audience, "Why did you choose to throw paralysis upon that man, instead of refuting his arguments?" The Hakim answered, "If you have a sword in your hand, do you charge the opponent with mud bricks? Even a monkey would not chatter if it could do something more effective. That man wanted to defeat me, not to discover truth." Elephant meat. Ibrahim Qas, or Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Ahmad al-Qas, the palm weaver, died in 910 of the Christian era. He was an associate of Junayd of Baghdad and of Nuri. Qawas's name is associated with teaching narratives which are understood at the ordinary level and also lead to deeper understanding of man. The present story is preserved in al-Tanuki's book Al-Faraj Ba'd al-Shida, written in the 10th century, whose name may be translated as release after hardship. The story exemplifies just this, and although placed in a travel tale frame, it is allegorical of the right and wrong ways to approach, and also to assess, human development and intention. Ibrahim Qas relates this instruction narrative, which has been used to test the understanding of students of Sufism. In company with a number of Sufis, I was making a journey on shipboard when we were wrecked, and I found myself with some others just able to reach a desolate shore. We did not know where we were, neither did we have any food. It seemed that we would be likely to perish as days passed without any sign of succor. We discussed the position and decided that each of us would make a vow to do some good, or to abandon some evil which cut him off from his Lord. In this way, we thought, the exercise of sincerity might be the means of providing escape from helplessness. Each one made his oath, one that from now on he would carry out fasting, another one that he would pray so many times each day, and yet another one that he would carry out pilgrimages on foot. Everyone in this way made his declaration and compact that he would abstain from some indulgence, or else that he would do something of religious worth. Now it came to me to declare my vow, and I was asked by the others to speak. I wanted to make my promise, and it came into my mind without any thought or consideration that I would say, I shall not eat any elephant meat. The others exclaimed, This is no time for joking and amusement, no time for such things, as we remain in this danger of death. I answered, By God, I did not say this in the spirit you mention. While you were talking, I thought over all the possible good actions I might do, and all the bad things I might avoid, and something prevented me from choosing one of them. And what I have just said simply came to me without any reflection, and I said it. It is possible that some divine wisdom has put the idea into my head, and has allowed me to speak in this way. The party then decided to explore further into the land where they were cast, to look for food. After arranging for a central point at which to reassemble, and that anything found should be shared, they started their search. They had not gone far when my friends found a young elephant, and decided that they could survive if they killed it to eat. The animal was slaughtered, and the meat was cooked over a fire. Although they asked me to share the food, I was unable to do so, and I answered, You are all witnesses that I have made the vow to abstain from this very thing, and I cannot break that oath. It may even be that God has caused me to think of this particular vow so that I might die. In any case, it is unlawful to break my oath. After eating, everyone lay down to sleep, and soon we heard the trumpeting of an infuriated elephant bearing down upon us. The noise was so great that the earth shook, and all were terrified. Since it seemed obvious that everyone was to be killed, they gave up hope, and murmured their confession of faith, as people do when faced by death. Now the elephant, when he reached us, extended his trunk to each traveller in turn, smelling him. One by one, as he smelt the odour of roast elephant meat, he stamped the man to death, until he came to me. I lay on the ground, repeating my shahada, or confession, in mortal terror. The elephant smelt me again and again, not as hastily as he had done with the others. Then he caught me up in his trunk, and I imagined that he was going to kill me in some way different from the others. But he placed me on his back, where I sat, and started to move away, sometimes walking, sometimes running, covering a long distance. I was extremely uncomfortable on the animal's back, yet I began to think that perhaps I might be able in some way to escape. It was dawn when the elephant took me down and placed me on the earth, running off in the direction from which we had come. I could not understand the reason for his actions and was still in fear. But eventually he vanished over the horizon. Giving thanks for my deliverance, I offered prayers and thanks to the Lord, and when I felt the heat of the day, I looked up and realized that I was beside a broad highway. I went along the road, and after some time came to a populous city, where I related all that had happened to the people, who were most surprised and said that it was a distance of ordinarily several days from which the elephant had brought me. After spending some time in that city, and recovering from my exhaustion, I was able to return to my own land in safety and health. Generosity. The great teacher Sal of Tustar relates that God told Moses that real self-sacrifice for the sake of others is the basis of the greatest capacity for perception of the divine, the extreme self-sacrifice which was given to Muhammad and his followers. Imam Ghazali relates, in the third book of his Revival of Religious Sciences, how a man who was famed as generous learnt what generosity really was. The Black Slave and the Dog. Abdullah ibn Jafar owned an orchard and went one day to visit it. He passed through a vineyard where he saw a black slave sitting, with some bread in front of him and a dog nearby. As Abdullah watched, the slave took a piece of the bread and threw it to the dog, which ate it. Then he gave it another piece, and another. Abdullah asked, "How much bread are you given every day?" The slave answered, "That quantity which you have just seen eaten by the dog." "Why," Abdullah asked, "do you give it to a dog, instead of attending first to your own need?" "There are no dogs hereabouts," said the black man, "and this one has come from a great distance and is hungry. Because of this, I did not desire to eat my bread." "But how will you manage for food today?" asked the generous Abdullah. "I shall endure the hunger," said the black. Abdullah thought, "I am the one who has the reputation for generosity, and yet this slave is more philanthropic." He bought the vineyard and gave it to the slave, also buying his freedom and releasing him. Grouping. There was once a king who visited the sage Bahauddin Naqshband, the designer, and sat observing his assembly. Afterwards, when they were eating, the king said, "Teacher of the age, your disciples, when you are in session, are ranged in semicircles and in an orderly manner very similar to that of my own court. Is there any significance in this?" Bahauddin answered, "King of the world, how are your own courtiers stationed? Tell me, and I shall describe the ordering of the ranks of the seekers." "The first arc," said the king, "is composed of those who are in especial favor with me, so that they are nearest. The second array comprises the most important and powerful people in the realm, and the ambassadors. The outer rank is for all the lesser ones." "In that case," said the Shah, "our marshalling of the people is far from the intention expressed by you. Those nearest to me are the deaf, so that they shall hear. The middle group is composed of the ignorant, so that they may pay attention to the teaching. Farthest away are the enlightened, for whom proximity of this kind is unimportant. Scent and reality. The Master Bahuddin was sitting one evening after dinner, surrounded by a large number of newcomers, old and young, all eager to learn. A silence fell, and the Master asked for a question. Someone said, "What is the greatest difficulty in the learning and the teaching of the way?" The Master answered, "People go by superficialities. They are attracted by preaching, by rumour and report, and by that which excites them, like bees to the scent of flowers." The man asked, "But how else are people to approach wisdom, or bees flowers?" The Master answered, "The human approaches wisdom through report and noise, preaching and reading and excitement. After he has approached it, however, he stays near it to demand more of the same, not whatever it can give, which is what it is there for. Bees approach flowers by scent, but they do not, once arrived at the proximity of the bloom, demand merely more and more scent. They adjust to the nectar which they have to collect. This is the equivalent of the reality of wisdom, of which the report and imaginings are, as it were, the scent. So the number of real bees among humanity is very small, whereas almost all bees are bees, in being able to collect nectar. Almost all beings are not yet human beings, in the sense of being attuned to perceive what they were created for." Then the Master said, "Let those who came here to Casa al-Arifin because of reading stand up." Many stood. "Let those," he continued, "who came to us because of hearing about us also stand up." Many more stood. "Those who are still seated," he continued, "are those who came because they perceived our presence and authenticity in another subtle manner. Those who are standing, old and young, include many who only demand more and more of their feelings to be stirred, who desire excitement or calm. Before they can learn what they cannot experience elsewhere, they must require knowledge and not services of attraction." He then said, "There are those who are attracted to a teacher because of his repute, and who accordingly travel to see him, to seek even more of the same sensation. When he dies, they visit his grave, again for a similar reason. Unless their aspirations are transformed, as if by alchemy, they will not find truth." And, he said, there are those who visit a teacher not because they have heard of him as a great living mentor, not because they wish to see his tomb, but because they recognize his inmost reality. One day everyone will possess this faculty. Now Bahuddin the designer said, "But in the meantime, the work which will be done eventually through the generations has to be performed in one and the same individual. To become a Moses, you will have to transcend your Pharaoh. The man who is attracted by repute must become, as it were, another man. He must become a man who stays in proximity to wisdom because he has sensed its inmost reality. This is the purpose of this work before he can learn. Until he has learnt this, he is a mere dervish. A dervish desires, a Sufi perceives." The heretics. It is related that Imam Al-Ghazali was invited one day to an assembly of jurists, whose chief said to him, "You are a learned man, as we are also from among the learned. Therefore humbler folk come to you to seek interpretations of the Sharia, the holy law. It has been reported to us that you have advised some of these people not to observe the fast during the month of Ramadan. You are also said to have stated that certain people should not make the pilgrimage to Mecca. Others have averred that you have reprimanded people for saying, "There is no God but Allah." Such mischievous words, if true, are proof to us of infidelity. Only your reputation has so far protected you from death for apostasy. The people have a right to be protected from such as you. Ghazali sighed and answered, "The holy law of Islam itself says that people who are not of a full understanding of the law and what it means are not culpable under that law, nor subject to its rules. These include children and imbeciles, but must also include those bereft of understanding. If a man does not perceive the inner reality of fasting, or goes on a pilgrimage only to suffer, or says the confession of faith and has no faith, he is bereft of understanding, and should not be encouraged to continue, but must be put on the road to understanding. The people, in your words, have the right to be protected from such as you, who would reward them for no merit and persecute them for no crime. If a man cannot walk by reason of having a lame leg, do you tell him to walk, or do you give him a crutch or heal his affliction? It is due to his foretelling of the appearance of such as you that the Prophet has said, 'Islam came as a stranger, and it will depart as a stranger.' Understanding of the meaning of things is beyond your intention, your training, and your capacity. That is why there is nothing left to you but to threaten people with death for apostasy. And yet it is not I who am the apostate, but you." Neighbor. Imam Abu Hanifa was one of the great Sufis, and is recognized as the founder of the Hanifite school of law. He was so independent that he would never go to court, although the Caliph tried everything to attract the interest of the most illustrious sage of the time. Abu Hanifa had a neighbor, a cobbler who was also a considerable drunkard. Every night the wild ravings of the alcoholic disturbed his meditations, but the Imam did not complain. One night there was no sound from the cobbler's room, and the Imam, going to inquire about his welfare, found that the imperial police had arrested him. He immediately went to the palace to see the Caliph Mansur. At the sight of the Imam, the guards sprang to attention, the officers and courtiers bowed, and the emirs rose from their places. The Caliph went to the door of the throne room to receive Abu Hanifa, and brought him to the throne itself, and seated him upon it. "May I know the reason for the honor of this visit?" the Caliph asked. "The cobbler from next door has been arrested, and I come to ask for his release," said the Imam. "But," said the captain of the guard, "this man is a disorderly drunkard." "This man," said the Imam, "is without friends and is my neighbor." "Illustrious Imam," said the Caliph, "your nobility of spirit must receive its true recognition. You intercede for one prisoner. Our generosity matches yours. I hereby release every single prisoner in the empire of Islam." Teaching. The Sufi sage Sa'di of Shiraz was on his way to Baghdad, when the caravan which he was with was attacked by bandits. When the robbers asked him for his possessions, Sa'di handed their chief a pile of books and some gold coins. "I give these to you as a gift, so do not regard them as stolen," he said, "but make good use of them." The robbers sneered, and their chief said, "I suppose you're trying to teach us goodness." "No," said Sa'di, "I do not think that I can teach you anything, so I am hoping that I can give you these items, books and money, freely, and that in return you will do something for me with them. And what is that? Find a wise man, give him these books, and pay his upkeep. Let him at least teach your children about the evils of theft, so that they may not repeat your mistakes. The four types. It is related that Bahuddin Naqshband was asked about the various kinds of people pursuing higher knowledge. He said, "I shall tell you by means of an allegory, not to be taken as literally true, but reflecting the condition of the human being." Then he told this story. It is recorded in the traditions of the lovers of truth that when the souls were created before the bodies, they were asked what they wanted as a means of travelling in this world. There were four parties among them. The first desired to travel on foot as the safest method. The second desired horses, for this would mean less work for them. The third wished to travel on the wind to overcome limitations. The fourth chose light, by which they could understand as well as move. These four groups still exist, and all people still abide by one of these characteristics. Those who are the pedestrians are limited in space and speed. They are the imitators. The horsemen are those who rely on books, and are thus driven by the horse of the author's beliefs. The third category are blown all over the place as if by the wind, and the fourth are the Sufis. In terms of studies, the first group attach themselves to lower and exciting cults, the second to zealously propagated ideas, the third to systems of their own choosing or devising, taking something here and something else there. The fourth are the Sufis. We can judge the ability of the people by the choice which they have made of travelling. The first group are interested in what they think are techniques, the second in exciting thoughts and reports, the third in one thing after another, and the fourth recognize the true Sufic reality. The fires of today. It is related that Bahuddin Naqshband said, "I was invited to speak at an assembly of the educated and the ignorant. There arrived a very large collection of people, attentive and interested, but as I looked and felt, I did not at that time see a single human being. I said to the people whom I had taken with me, in order to demonstrate the limitations of action upon the unsuitable, a well is not filled by means of dew, and a leaf will not be found after being deluged with the contents of a well." I started by saying, "Sufis are a disgrace. They have secret teachings which they keep from the ordinary people. The eminence which many Sufis attain is due to the exercise of forbidden powers. Now tell me, do you want to be a Sufi?" Almost all of those present shook their heads. Then I continued. Such were the words spoken by the ignorant, foolish, and block-headed governor of Kufa, of whom you all know much. As you are aware, he was a bigot, a murderer, and an enemy of humanity. It is small wonder that he felt the need to represent the Sufis in this manner. Now all of us here know that Sufis are the elect of humankind. Who among you dares to call himself a Sufi? At these words everyone rose. Thus does pomposity, ab-o-tab, stem from vanity, guru, which is a manifestation of the commanding self, nafs-i-amara. The fires of today are the ashes of tomorrow. The law of reverse effect. A man once visited Al-Shah, Bahuddin Naqshband, saying that he wanted directions on how to behave, on how to live his life, on what to do and what not to do. The master called some of his disciples to dinner and asked the man to put his questions again. When this had been done, Sheikh Bahuddin said, "You should try to live an easy life, supporting yourself by stealing and bringing part of the money to me. You should neglect prayer and tidiness of appearance, and should always try to get the upper hand over other people. In short, lack of principles and cunning should see you through." As the master spoke, the applicant was becoming more and more uneasy. As soon as he had finished, he ran from the room. Some weeks later, Bahuddin asked whether there was any news of his would-be disciple. Yes, they told him, he is living an exemplary life in Samarkand. He also tells everyone that you are Satan and try to wean him from the right path. Bahuddin laughed. If I had told him to live a good life, he said, he would not have obeyed, because all the injunctions so to do have been dinned into him from babyhood. In reality, he hankered for something more strange, and when I assailed his inward self with an account of a strange way of life, he realized that he would feel better as a compliant and virtuous man. But, asked his disciple, what of his blackening your name as an adviser in sin? Those who believe evil partake in evil, said the master, and I am sure that the scholars of Samarkand are not such people. Treasure. It is related of the most ancient Sufis, and repeated by many who followed them, throughout the schools which have formed and dissolved and formed again, that the anecdote of the treasure works within the mind to bring understanding of deep things to those who believe only that shallow feelings are deep, and that low things are high, and that what is on the surface is what is on the inside. The treasure. Several men went to a teaching master and clamoured for his attention, each vying with the other to ask his question, or to make his statement, or to get his answer. When the master had produced order in this multitude, the first man said, "I have been seeking for many years, and I have found nothing." The second man said, "I have found delight in the seeking. Is this then its purpose?" The third man said, "Sometimes I think that I have found, and then I feel that I have not, and that I must continue." The fourth man said, "Sometimes I doubt myself, sometimes the teachers, sometimes the truth itself." The master answered, "There may be 100 questions, but there is only one answer, and I shall now give it and inform you all. This is it. There were a number of men who were attracted to the design of digging for a treasure. They took all sorts of implements and went to the place where it was buried, and they started to work. Some tired easily, which made them feel that the task might not be worth while. Some found small fragments of clay pots, and from time to time thought that this must be the treasure itself. Some enjoyed for the first time the pleasures of hard work, which they imagined to be the delights of seeking or of finding. Some again looked at the mud and the stones, and were distressed by their abundance, for they were people easily dispirited. And there were many other men and women too, who felt many things, for they had put a time or a shape upon the work, and when the time was past, or the shape, as they thought, found, they became a prey to delusion and agitation. Those who persisted found the container which held the precious hoard. Those who were the victims of confusion and debate did not. The confused ones passed the rest of their days in seeking information and explanations, but the dedicated bore off the treasure. So those who were agitated and deluded stumbled from one sage to another, asking how they might know the treasure, how they might seek it, how they might find it. The sages, one and all, told them that they could not do any of these things unless they were as those who had succeeded. But the people clamoured for success, not for guidance, as they were already convinced that they possessed, from the start, the mind, the body, and the spirit, which would enable them to bring their design to fruitful conclusion. Permission to expound. Because of the special nature of Sufi writings, teachers of the way have often issued permissions to expound and to explain their books to worthy individuals. Not everyone, of course, has abided by this requirement, and many have been the supposed Sufis who have made a career for themselves by purporting to be able to teach through the books of Sufi masters. It is related that a dervish was holding forth on one of the illustrious poet Jami's works one day, when a newcomer slipped into the lecture hall and started to shake his head more and more often, as the learned one gave his interpretations of the meaning of Jami. Everyone was looking at the stranger, and finally the dervish fixed him with a penetrating eye and cried, "Do you presume to disagree with me?" "Yes," said the other man. "And," asked the dervish, "have you permission from the great master Jami to interpret his works?" "No." "Then who are you, and by what right do you behave in this ridiculous manner, challenging a man of my importance?" "My name is Jami," said the visitor, and slipped away.